Welcome everyone to our webinar today, Making Customs Painless, how to avoid mistakes and import with confidence. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Devora and I'm on the marketing team here at Freightos. It's nice to see so many people turning out for what's a really important topic, one that every importer deals with and that many feel can be challenging. So we actually surveyed our buyers a couple months back and found that 17% of them listed dealing with customs as their biggest pain point in shipping. And we talked to our customer success team and they said about half of the questions that they get, or maybe even more, have to do with customs. So we know that this is an important issue, and what we'd like to do today is demystify it, demystify US customs, and help you book with confidence for your next shipment. So to that end, we have two outstanding speakers today. Adam Lewis is the co-founder and president of Clearit, an online customs broker that we have the pleasure of working with at Freightos. Adam is in the weeds of customs day in and day out, so we're thrilled that he's joining us. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you.
And then we also have Sharon Shamroth, who's joining us as well. She's on the team here at Freightos.com. She's a senior product manager, and she's going to show us how easy it is to book customs on Freightos.com, right on the platform. So welcome, Sharon, as well. Thanks for coming. Okay, so first, just a word about Freightos.com. Freightos.com is a digital freight marketplace helping importers and exporters reduce logistics spend and save time with instant comparison, booking, and management of air, ocean, and land shipments from top logistics providers. The result is international shipping that's as smooth as booking a flight online. So as global shipping conditions shift, we strive to keep up with the needs of our customers by reducing hassle and delivering streamlined access to market range all-in freight quotes for small and medium businesses. To that end, we enable our customers to book customs clearance right on the platform. And with that, I'll turn to Adam to tell us a little bit about Clearit.
Thank you very much. So I'll start off with just, I guess, a little bit of background of myself. Again, my name's Adam Lewis. I'm the co-founder of Clearit along with my brother, Ryan. We're actually second generation customs brokers. So we had the pleasure of growing up in this business. After I finished school, I had decided that, that I wanted to join, the customs brokerage business. And before I did that, I actually worked for a customer of ours because I wanted to get the perspective of an importer when dealing with a customs broker. I thought that was very important. And when I came into this business, it was when customs brokerage was still very regional. You would have a lot of different customs brokers all over the country that maybe had expertise in certain products. And what I wanted to do is I really wanted to expand our reach. I wanted to expand our market without necessarily having to to have a physical presence. And in doing so, we started a digital customs provider. When Freightos, first really asked me to do this, there was, a lot of questions about problems and issues that plague importers. And my goal here is to really let you know with a little bit of confidence, the same confidence that you bring to your business, you should have no issues dealing with customs. It's quite straightforward, and with the tools that Clearit can provide you, you should have the same smooth process as you would booking freight with Freightos.com.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What does a customs broker do? I think a lot of people just need a little clarity on what they're looking for and whether to use a customs broker.
Right. So in a nutshell, a customs broker, we really ensure and advise you on compliance in order to mitigate risk with your imports. So really our job is to advise you. We gather information, assess compliance, and then we'll create a customs declaration for you, on your behalf to U.S. Customs. So it's kind of a fine line. We're really considered the first line of defense when it comes to import regulations. So we work, both on behalf of the customs broker and, as a form of representative, not representative, but, on behalf of the U.S. government. So, we advise our importers, and we kind of work on behalf of the government as well. We're federally licensed and regulated. In a nutshell, we're compliance experts on importing, and you use us for advice.
Okay, great. So with that, we'll move to the main content today. And as Adam said, the goal here is to encourage confidence, to let everybody know you can master customs. And so we'll get into a few different areas. The first is going to be documentation. The second is classification. The third is customs exams. And then afterwards, we'll get into booking customs on Freightos.com. So let's start with documentation. And Adam, I'll just turn it to you. Why is documentation so important? And what do importers need to know to get it right?
Yeah, so the most important thing that we tell our importers is to really familiarize yourself with the process and the required documents. The commercial invoice is actually the most important document relating to customs import. The reason for that being is that kind of sets the stage for what a customs broker is going to do for you. So ensuring that you have all the components required on a commercial invoice, and based on that, a good customs broker will be able to tell you the requirements. So it's very important to be proactive with your imports. In the same way that you're planning for your business, you want to plan ahead for your imports. So while as a customs broker we do have the ability to kind of turn on a dime, you may have only been told that you need a customs broker at the very last second from your freight forwarder, especially if this is your first time importing. What I say is, the most important thing is speak to a customs broker ahead of time, maybe before your goods have actually been exported. Ask the right questions. Does the product that I'm importing require any additional documentation or registration outside of the norm? Some requirements might be obvious. For example, if you're importing products that are ingested or applied to the skin, you're most likely going to need to have some form of FDA registration, which is a very simple process if done ahead of time. Generally, it needs to be done before your goods are exported. So it's a good idea to talk to a customs broker before your goods actually ship. Some things that you might not consider, for example, if you have products, if you're importing products that contain wood, you might not think that, just because you're bringing in something in that's made with wood, that you would need any kind of special documentation. But, for example, a TASCA form is required, for those types of imports. So it's not complicated. It's not something that takes a lot of time, but this is, added documentation that's, required on top of a commercial invoice for an import. So again, most important thing is familiarize yourself with invoice requirements. And, as long as you have a proper invoice, everything else should fall into place. Working with a good customs broker, they'll advise you on anything else that would be required.
Can you give a couple of examples of what to look for in the commercial invoice?
Yeah, so some of them might be, very straightforward. I'd say the most important thing for a customs broker is, a proper item description. You'd be surprised working with suppliers overseas, where, especially dealing with US imports, for your supplier, English might not necessarily be their first language. An English invoice is required to import into the US. So making sure that the item description of the product that you purchase matches up with what's actually on that invoice. So, you can have kind of a sketchy kind of description, not sketchy, but, a different description of the item that you purchased. The HTS code that might be present might match that actual product, but it doesn't necessarily match the description, and that might cause some confusion. So, number one, making sure that you have an accurate item description. Most often, overseas suppliers will give you an HTS classification, but generally you should take that with a grain of salt. Overseas suppliers are not, well versed in customs regulations or how to properly classify their products. So it's a good idea to speak with your customs broker, or at least understand, why your product is being classified the way it is. Of course, you want to make sure that you have, the country of origin declared on that commercial invoice. So, you might be buying a product from one country, but it was actually manufactured in another country. So you want to ensure that, that you do have that country of origin marked. You want to make sure that the currency of the sale is actually detailed on the invoice. Most often when you're dealing with a country in the Far East, for China, for example, they're dealing in USD. But if you're buying from Europe, it's possible that the invoice you received is actually in euros. So you want to make sure that the currency is actually stated properly on the invoice. And some of the other more obvious things is make sure that that you as the importer are listed on the commercial invoice. The exporter has all of his details on there. You want to ensure that your tax ID is on that commercial invoice. There's a handful of requirements, not too complicated, but it's a good idea to familiarize yourself with those requirements ahead of time. So that when you hand that over to your customs broker, they can get to work right away. They don't necessarily have to go back and forth, between you, and you have to go back and forth between your supplier to make sure that you have all the proper information.
Okay, great. So we talked about additional documentation. Yeah, and here are just some additional points that came up when we were discussing this. I think whatever the product is, there's a way to deal with it. And you mentioned that people do not need to specialize when they look for a broker. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it used to be, like I mentioned before, brokers used to be very regional and perhaps specialized in importing certain products. That's not really the case anymore. A good customs broker is built around a good team who have expertise in different products. But no, I would say that most customs brokers these days have a good handle on classifying and understanding the requirements for all products. Again, I say work with a customs broker ahead of time, because you might ask you might be importing a product or planning to import a product that might be a little bit more complicated than general merchandise. And a customs broker might need to do a little bit of research in order to give you proper advice. That's not to say that that these brokers aren't well versed or anything like that, but rules and regulations are constantly changing. As customs brokers, we constantly have to stay on top of that. As a matter of fact, we have weekly training with some of our consultants, to ensure that we're always on top of changing regulations, constantly reading notes that are released by customs. So as long as you can kind of get this information over to a customs broker and start working on it early, nothing is insurmountable. Everything can be imported. There's no product where any of the requirements would be outside of what a customs broker should be able to handle.
And when you talk about getting it there in advance, how much time are you talking about?
Well, I'd really say it's based on how quickly you can then gather the information that's required of you. Again, the onus is really on the importer to provide accurate information to a customs broker. So, if you provide information to us and we come back to you and say, okay, there's some additional requirements, we're going to need, some more information. You'll most likely have to reach out to your supplier to get that information. Your supplier might not necessarily have the same sense of urgency that you do. So as long as you can give yourself, a couple days in advance, or you might have been working with a supplier for a long time and have a good relationship, and they can get back to you pretty quickly. You can maybe play it a little bit more fast and loose. But really, the idea is, give yourself time to be able to then go back to a supplier to gather information. If you need to fill out additional paperwork, just make sure you give yourself time to do that. Most often, U.S. Customs wants to see these additional requirements in place before export. So before it actually leaves the country of origin. So, I'm not saying that you need to start working with a customs broker months or years in advance to start planning something. But, last second isn't always great. But, we understand the nature of business, and business moves quickly. So we'll work as fast as we can to get you that information. But then it's really on you to go back to your supplier, gather that information, and submit it back to us.
Okay, and what about for importers that are based outside the US? What do they need to know?
Pretty straightforward. Luckily, the US is quite open to what we refer to as non-resident importers. In order to import into the US, you have to get what's called an importer assigned number. And that's kind of just like an importer number that's assigned from US CBP, US Customs. And the process is actually very easy in the US, as long as you can, provide us with some sort of documentation, that shows that you are, a legal entity in that foreign country, that's in good standing. We can generally get you an importer number that same day. So it's not a long process. And really the only difference is because you are not, in fact, in the United States, and the person or entity that's going to be receiving the cargo is different than the importer in this case, because you're a non-resident importer, you have to make sure that you provide the tax ID number of the entity who's going to be receiving it. So again, not complicated, as long as you know what you have to do. It's the process is just as easy as being a U.S. importer, and Clearit really does try and make it simple. We try and create a level playing field so that non-resident importers, can sell to the U.S. marketplace as easily as as a domestic supplier.
Okay, great. All right, we're going to move on now to classification, which you mentioned a little bit about earlier. A lot of people find classifying to be a big challenge. So let's talk about what it means to classify goods, what's at stake, and how importers can get a head start on classifying and getting a sense of what they'll have to pay.
So, customs brokers and the process of classifying goods really is a professional service. Like I mentioned before, as customs brokers, we go through weekly training in terms of classification. On top of just staying, on top of newest kind of rules and regulations. I'm not sure if anyone has actually taken a look at the, harmonized tariff schedule, but there are millions and millions of potential, classification possibilities. And while it's possible to get a pretty accurate idea of a classification on your own, we do recommend working with a customs broker, to really nail it down. At the end of the day, a customs broker, the classification from a customs broker rather is only an opinion. The only way to really get a binding ruling is to actually go to U.S. Customs and request that. That's something that we recommend if you are going to be importing high volumes or large amounts of specific product, where that if you were to be audited and a change in the classification can actually put you into a different duty rate, it might be worth your time and your money. The process usually takes about a week or two, might cost you a few $100s. You do it through a customs broker where we document your product, we submit it to U.S. Customs, and then you get back a ruling. But generally, I would trust the opinion of a customs broker in terms of a classification. Anyone who's offering a classification from a customs broker has years and years and years of experience. There are some tools online that can help, the layman or an importer actually classify their goods. And, it's a good exercise. However, I would always suggest speaking to a customs broker about the proper classification, even if that classification, again, has been listed on your commercial invoice from a supplier. They might be using a classification from a different country. So remember, an HTS code is international, but only the first 6 digits apply internationally. Every country has a different kind of tail number. So the classification, even if it's right on their end, might differ slightly than how it would be classified in the US. And
so if I just want to get a sense in advance of what my costs will be, is there a way for me to do that before I book? Like you mentioned some of these tools. What does it mean to look at these rulings? Can I look at those in advance to get a sense?
Yeah. So again, like I said, there are some tools available online that's free and open to everyone. One kind of trick of the trade as a customs broker is those rulings that I mentioned, they're actually published online for everyone to see. So there is, it's a website called Cross Rulings, and you can Google it, where you can search by keyword. And what it will do is it'll bring up previous rulings that US Customs has given out. So what you can do is you can, put in a keyword that kind of relates to your product. You can then scroll through the descriptions of the products that have been given rulings. You can click on those, view the HTS code that was assigned to it, and then it actually gives you a scope. So what that means is it gives you it's basically the detail that was used to say, okay, this is what the product is, and this is why customs assigned this number. So it's actually a very good tool. Customs brokers, rather, sometimes if they're having a little bit of trouble classifying a product, they might use that as kind of a place to begin. And it's very simple and easy to use, and any importer can do it. And I recommend that even just as an exercise, take your product, put in a few keywords there, look it up, see if you can find your product and classify it yourself. And obviously, I would then go back to your customs broker, ask for a proper classification, and then you can kind of compare and contrast, what you two kind of came up with.
Yeah, so I'll just add also, sorry to interrupt, go ahead.
No, I did also want to mention that Clearit is actually releasing, what we consider to be, the best HTS classification calculator on the market. Traditionally, they have not been very reliable. So, in the last couple of years, a few different companies and a few different providers have put out classification and import calculators that, were just wildly off. So we've actually spent the last couple of years compiling databases and cross-referencing those with layman's terms. So for example, if you were to actually look at the tariff book, they're not using terms that you and I would use. So I can't, you're not going to find terms like a hoodie, like I might be an importer looking to import sweatshirts and hoodies, from overseas, and I'm going to go to the tariff book and, it's in PDF form, so you can search it. You're not going to find that term. So, what we've been doing over the last couple of years is assigning layman's terms to a lot of these classifications. That's going to make it much easier for you to actually find an accurate description and an accurate HTS code. And then from there, it becomes very easy to calculate almost your exact cost down to the penny. So that will be available, to the public, probably within the next, 30 days or so.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think a lot of people just want to have a sense, even if they want to clarify it later, just to get a sense in advance of what they'll actually owe.
Yeah, and don't be shy, if I can interrupt, just, don't be shy to actually ask your customs broker. If you can say, hey, can you give me a good estimate of what it's going to cost me? They should have no issue, providing that to you, whether it's, whether it takes them a couple hours or whatever it is to get you back that information. Don't feel like that's not something you can ask your customs broker.
Okay, I'm gonna just take a second to look at like the scary part of this, and it's not really to scare people, it's just to let people know that classifying is important, right?
Yes.
Because as you mentioned, it's not straightforward, and you might look at, a sweatshirt, and to you it's a sweatshirt, and to customs it's many other things that need to be pinned down specifically. Right. And I think you mentioned that the importer is the one who's going to ultimately bear responsibility for that if there's inspections and if there's a misclassification. So it's important to get it right. But as Adam mentioned, there are professionals there to help you. Okay. Here's sort of, things to keep in mind. Adam, do you want to check off these boxes for us?
Yeah, sure. So, like you're showing here, give yourself some time to make sure your classification is correct. Trust your customs broker with this kind of information. A lot of times, as a customs broker, we'll get pushback from an importer saying, no, I don't believe this classification is correct. While a customs broker is working for you, right? You hire a customs broker, you pay a service fee. You're hiring us for a service. At the end of the day, we have to ensure that you are compliant. You might say to your customs broker, yes, but I've imported it before under this classification. And, if it's kind of close enough, and, to the point where we feel like, yes, that classification might work, then at the end of the day, we'll say, listen, the onus is on you, the importer. We might not necessarily recommend this classification because, as you know, changing classifications might put you in a different duty rate. We'll say, listen, the onus is on you. It's not recommended. However, we can submit, your entry based on this classification. If it's so wildly off and doesn't even come close to that actual item description, legally, we wouldn't be able to submit your entry. Not necessarily that we couldn't, but we'd be putting our own business at risk. Like we say, we're federally licensed. We're constantly, as a customs broker, you're constantly, I don't want to say scrutinized, but we are audited. And, if we are to submit a classification that is completely off and you're examined and it's found that this classification doesn't work, while the onus does end up on the importer, customs will come back to us and say, hey, you should have known better that this wasn't correct. So trust your customs broker. It's okay to have that kind of conversation, the back and forth, and you can kind of plead your case, why this, why that. But at the end of the day, if you're working with a good customs broker, trust the information that they're providing you. We're professionals.
Okay. Okay. So far we've talked about documentation, we've talked about classification, and I think it's important to point out here right before you just mentioned, Adam, that when people talk about customs fees, what they're talking about is actually a few different parts. It's the fee, it's the entry fee or the broker's fee. Then there's the actual duties that they're paying, and that's going to be closely tied to the classification. And then, when people talk about extra fees, that's usually coming from customs exams, which are not frequent, but let's talk about what people need to expect when it comes to exams, what people can anticipate.
Sure. I generally like to tell my importers that, a customs exam shouldn't really be on your mind until it happens. Chances are, if you're a regular importer, over the course of your importing career, you probably will receive at least one exam, maybe two, maybe three, but it's not something that happens too often. Customs exams generally are random. US CBP has the right to inspect any cargo coming into the US. So, they do have, just random inspections, or, it can be caused, by previous non-compliance. So, if you've imported before and the classification wasn't correct, or there was some sort of issue beforehand, you might be more likely to be inspected the next time your goods come in. I don't want to say that you're red flagged, but there might be a flag on your importer account that there has been some non-compliance in the past. But it's not necessarily something that you should be too concerned with until it happens. The unfortunate part of a customs exam is that it's at the expense of an importer. So, there are costs associated with having, an officer actually come and physically inspect your cargo. It's possible that the CFS warehouse that your cargo has arrived in, they can actually facilitate that inspection, and other times they cannot. So it actually has to be transferred to another facility. So those handling and transfer costs are on the importer. Generally, there isn't really too much of a cost for the inspection itself, because it's part of the customs process. But that handling, the transportation that's required, and just because your cargo went for inspection, that doesn't mean that the warehouse is necessarily putting a stop on storage fees. So that inspection process can lead to you going over your free allotted time at the CFS warehouse where your goods were placed after they were moved from the ship or from a plane, however it entered. So at the end of the day, not something you need to be concerned with. Yes, when it happens, the costs are on you. But as long as you've provided your customs broker with accurate information, there should be no problem.
Okay. All right. Adam, thank you so much. This is really, really helpful.
My pleasure.
I mean, what I'm getting is, we need to leave plenty of time, ask a lot of questions, and just sort of take this into account from the beginning, that like it's going to be part of the process. And sort of people should take that into account. Yeah,
and I don't want people to feel that that you kind of have to do everything ahead of time, and you got to really importing for most importers, it's part of their business, right? And you should take the same approach to importing as you do to any other part of your business. Do your homework, ask questions, don't be shy. At the end of the day, this is part of your business. It might cost you some money. So, do your homework, ask the questions, but there's nothing insurmountable. When it comes to importing, it should be very straightforward if you're working with a customs broker and you kind of follow their lead.
Okay, thank you. We'll get to more questions in a bit, but first we're going to turn to Sharon now. And Sharon's going to show us how to book customs brokerage on Freightos.com, and she's going to walk us through what the product looks like and how you do that. So, hi Sharon, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me here tonight, or today, depending on your time zone. Yes, so I'll be showing you how you can book a shipment on our platform with customs brokerage. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so this is the search page on Freightos.com. So the first part of the search, we ask what you're shipping. Are those pallets or containers? You then put in your origin and destination information, including the estimated goods ready date. And then this section over here asks you about customs brokerage. So if you do require customs brokerage services, then you put in your number of commodities and check off yes over there. And then if you're importing into the US, you'll need a customs bond. So with the customs bond, there are two options. We have a single entry bond and a continuous bond. The single entry bond, as it sounds, is for one import. If you're only shipping once, once, or your goods value is really low, then we recommend getting a single entry bond. The cost of the bond is based on your goods value. So if your goods value is under about $8,000, then you'll pay the minimum $50 fee for the single entry bond. But just to keep in mind on this one, that if your duties and taxes are very high, it will be recalculated. It's 0.5% of the goods value and the duties and taxes over $10,000. And also, if you do have FDA, you need to file FDA, then that can also increase the amount of the bond. Also, for single entry bonds, if you're shipping by ocean, there's an additional $75 fee for an ISF bond. If you are planning to import multiple times over the course of a year, we do recommend, as I said, the continuous bond. It's valid for 12 months, unlimited imports during that time, and it can be used with multiple freight forwarders, right? It's assigned to your business. So you're not it's also not connected to any specific customs broker. So once you have that, then you can use that on all shipments. We also ask about hazardous shipments and personal shipments. Freightos doesn't ship personal shipments, and hazardous shipments we only ship batteries. You can also add insurance to your shipment, which we really recommend. Insuring your goods, you never know what could happen along the way on the ship, and best to be safe. So once you search, so on the Freightos marketplace, we have multiple freight forwarders. All of our US imports use Clearit for customs brokerage. But if you're importing into another country, then the freight forwarder or the seller will provide customs brokerage. So you can see on the tile that customs brokerage is provided by Clearit. And you can click on the specific tile that you're interested in, the quote that you're interested in, and you can see here a cost breakdown of all the charges that are included. This is really important if you're comparing quotes that you might have received from another freight forwarder. You can make sure that, for example, origin and destination charges, are they included? Are you comparing apples to apples? And the section for customs brokerage is here near the bottom. You can see here who the provider is. And you see here we've got the import customs clearance fee, the ISF fee, that's for an ocean shipment, the single entry bond, and the ISF bond. Okay, so once you select your quote, then you'll be taken to the booking process. And here we ask for your name and also for for a description of your commodities. It's really important when you're describing your commodities to add as much as full a description as possible. As Adam mentioned, the better the description, the easier it is for them to get started on classifying your goods. If you know your HS code, you could put that in as well as a starting point. I'm going to switch now over to our test platform. It's not a real shipment. So this is what the post-booking page looks like. And once you've booked your shipment, you'll be taken to this page where we ask you more information on the contact details. Who is the consignor and the consignee? Do you have a pickup address, a delivery address that might be different? We also have a section here on customs. So here is the POA, or the power of attorney, and it's integrated with Clearit's system. Very simply fill in the form over here. If you are authorized to sign the power of attorney on behalf of your company, you can do that from this interface. And if you're not able to authorize it, you can put in the details of the person who is, and they'll be sent an email so they can easily complete that process. Over here, we have a section for documents. And this is where you would upload your commercial invoice. If you have multiple commercial invoices, that's not a problem. You can upload all of them. You can also add an optional packing list. The packing list is sometimes helpful in the customs brokerage process later on. So once you've filled in these details with more information about your shipment, then the shipment gets verified and sent over to the freight forwarder to start processing your shipment. It's also sent over to the customs broker so that they can get started on your classification. So this screen here shows another test shipment where it's it's a little further along. So you can see here there's a section here with all the documents. So if as Adam mentioned, sometimes the commercial invoice might not be accurate and you might need to send a new one, an updated one. You can just upload it over here through this interface. There's a section here to send documents specifically to the customs broker so that they get notified of those documents. You can do that here. Also, if you have any other type of documentation that's asked for the customs broker. And then here in the transit information section, we have a section for customs, and you can see once your power of attorney is accepted by Clearit, then you'll become an active as an importer of record. You can also see when your ISF was submitted and when clearance was submitted as well. And you'll receive notifications about the status of your shipment as it moves through all of these stages. And then once it's classified and entries filed and your duties and taxes are calculated, you'll receive a notification of the amount that's due, and you can pay that through the platform as well on your billing tab. So yeah, that's the process of booking on our platform. It's quite straightforward, and we of course have customer success representatives available to answer any of your questions as you go. So back to you, Tavara.
Okay, thanks so much, Sharon. Just a second. First question that we're just hearing from a lot of people right now is, what are brokers' fees and how does one pay their broker? I guess this one is for Adam.
That's a great question. Most customs brokers, their fees are dependent on the value of the cargo that you're bringing in. Clearit is actually the first and only customs broker to have a flat fee service. So we post our service fees online. It's a flat fee for the actual declaration. There might be some additional fees. For example, if your product requires a PGA declaration, that means actually making a declaration to a separate government agency. There's a small additional cost. It's $35 to make that declaration. And actually booking through Freightos, when working with Clearit through Freightos, you receive a small discount on the pricing. So if you're working with Clearit through Freightos, all of the billing is actually handled through Freightos. As you can see when you're booking your shipments, all of our service fees are listed there. And you have a pretty good idea of the service fees, and then of course duties and taxes are billed after the fact. So once we've actually completed your customs entry, you can ask for an estimation on the total cost. I believe in the future there's going to be an automated tool to actually help you with that. But once you've submitted your shipment, feel free to ask any of the Clearit representatives if you can get an estimation on what your total cost would be. So our fees, they're pretty standard. It's a flat fee and you can view them at any time. But in terms of the duties or taxes, import taxes that would be applied, those are really only estimated once we've actually begun classifying your product and done the customs entry.
And Sharon, can you just clarify how those fees work on Freightos.com?
Sure. So once we receive the exact duties and taxes amount from Clearit, that's then posted in your shipment charges page, and you'll be able to pay that through our billing page. You can pay those fees via credit card, earn some points on all those taxes, and yeah, it's a pretty simple process through the billing page.
Okay, cool. Okay, we have a question here for Adam from Mark. So Mark wants to know, is it easier to separate products if you're importing? So if you have an e-bike with lithium batteries, excuse me, so should you ship the battery sort of separate from the bike?
From a customs perspective, no, it doesn't make a difference at all to us. Because at the end of the day, when we're making our declaration, we have to say this is an electronic bicycle. It's coming, if it's being shipped in parts, doesn't necessarily make a difference to us. In terms of freight, on the other hand, that's a different story. Obviously, there are rules and regulations when it comes to shipping, lithium-ion batteries. So from a customs perspective, no, there's nothing to gain by shipping it separately. But of course, you want to speak with Freightos or your forwarder about, shipping those properly.
All right, we've got another one about goods from Ken. Do the rules regarding the import of wood products extend to the pallet material as well?
No. So, obviously most goods are shipped on pallets. Makes it much easier to load and offload, onto a container, or being placed, in the cargo hold of a plane. So that does not extend to a pallet. However, there are fumigation requirements for pallets coming into the U.S. So generally, you'll receive a fumigation certificate. I think it's a little bit more strict from some countries rather than others. And the reason for that is that the U.S. Customs or U.S. Agriculture does not want to have bugs coming in from other countries, and making their way into the United States. So generally, in terms of pallets, no, TSCA requirements are not part of it. But most shippers are fumigating their pallets and providing a fumigation certificate along with that.
Okay, great. Okay, here's one for Sharon. Can importers contact a custom broker for a tariff estimate before booking on Freightos.com?
So we also have an HS calculator that you can use. We don't have a way to contact the customs broker before booking, but as I mentioned, we use Clearit for all our US imports. So Adam, I guess you could
yeah,
you could answer that one if you're available.
Those types of questions are 100% free. When you're visiting Clearit, there are a number of ways to get in contact with us. Whether it's by visiting us and creating your free account outside of Freightos and submitting a request to us. There are different types of requests that you can submit to Clearit within our own platform. So whether that's a request to actually clear a shipment or any form of consulting, you can also just contact us on our homepage. Send us a message, send us a question saying, hey, I'm importing this product. Give us a little bit of background on the product. It would be great to have the cost, the value of that product as well. And what mode of transport you're going to be using to receive those goods into the US, because obviously that might affect the cost as well. And generally we'll get back to you pretty quickly. There's no cost associated with it. There's with Clearit, accounts are free. Most of our advice is free. Of course, if you have a big project to undertake, that would go towards our consulting wing, which might have some costs associated to it. But when you're working with Clearit, you're really only paying per transaction. So we only bill, when a customs declaration is created and submitted. So if you have any questions regarding your classification or just want an idea of how much it's going to cost, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to work with you.
It's nice to hear when things are free.
Yes.
Okay. Here's one for Adam. Can you explain the difference between a freight forwarder and a broker?
Sure. You know, Clearit, we call ourselves Clearit Customs Services. We don't necessarily love the term broker. Not to say that it has a negative connotation, but it kind of leads you to believe that we're just kind of an intermediary, like we're buying something and selling it, or we're taking information from somewhere else and passing it on to you. That's not the case. We're a professional service. A freight forwarder, while there are some that do offer custom services, a freight forwarder is really a form of intermediary between a steamship line or an airline and the client. So a freight forwarder is the one who's actually providing you with the booking of your freight, and a customs broker never actually physically handles your product. We're just doing the government paperwork for you. So forwarder is working on the freight side, customs broker is working on the compliance side. They are two very important pieces to the puzzle when it comes to international shipping. Equally important, but we have two very different jobs.
Okay. Okay, here's a question, another one for Adam. What would you recommend that people look for in choosing a customs broker? What types of factors should they take into account?
Number one is communication. So, when we started developing Clearit, I had worked as a traditional customs broker. Clearit is very much, now we're considered kind of the leaders in technology in terms of online custom services. And while there are a lot of reasons why we should look to the digitization of the customs brokerage service, to me, the number one thing was communication. Most customs brokers communicate by email, or calling in and trying to get a hold of the person who's actually doing your customs work, and there are significant delays when it comes to that. The platform that Clearit created, what it does is it creates a virtual workspace between you, and very similar to Freightos, it creates a virtual workspace between yourself and the customs broker. So to me, the most important thing is, when you need to submit documents to your customs broker, are you just kind of faxing or emailing it into a black hole? Or, are you able to log into a platform, submit your documentation, and you can actually see for yourself that those documents have been submitted, which you're able to do on Clearit. All the communication you have between yourself and the individual actually handling your import, that's contained in a nice, neat little chat space that you can go back and review. You can review all the documents you've submitted, your billing. So really the number one thing, that I would say to look for is communication. Is your customs broker able to communicate to you your requirements? Are you able to get in touch with them when you have a question or when something goes wrong? Do they go completely dark, or is there that constant sense of communication between the two of you?
Okay, great. I think we're going to take one more. And this is a question for Adam about tariffs, which is, will the tariffs be different if you are importing the same product from different places, let's say China, Vietnam, Malaysia? Question from David. Thanks, David.
No. So, well, the HTS classification will not change, right? The classification, the HTS classification is specific to the product itself and not from the country of origin. However, if you look at, for example, in the past few years, we had these USTR 301 retaliatory duties, which are referred to the Trump tariffs, which were specifically applied to a country like China. That's where you'll have the effect of a change in tariff. But the classification itself does not change based on the country of origin.
Okay. Okay. Just one last question. Adam, does Clearit focus on U.S. customs only?
No, so Clearit is both a US and Canadian customs broker. So we cover imports from anywhere around the world into North America. In the future, that might change. But as of right now, we're focused on the North American market. But I wouldn't be surprised if you see us expanding into other markets in the very near future.
Okay, I think we're going to wrap up here. We are reaching the end of our time. So I want to thank everybody for coming. Big thank you to Adam and to Sharon for joining us today. If anybody still has questions, feel free to be in touch. As Adam mentioned, you can be in touch with a broker in advance. You can always be in touch with us at Freightos. And you can check out free quotes at ship.freightos.com anytime you want to get a sense of how much your shipping costs will be. So again, thank you everyone for joining, and we'll talk to you soon.